Good morning, everyone. Welcome. Glad you're here. Good to see your faces in person. Hey, everybody online. Glad you could join us as well. Hey, we're here. So if you could, please rise or stand as you're able, and we'll start by singing together. Oh, Lord. Oh, Lord. How majestic is your name in all the earth. We behold the breaking dawn, the light that shines over everyone. We look to you, we long for you, oh Lord. We behold the rising sun, the earth awakes, your hope has come. We look to you, we long for you, oh Lord. Oh, Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh, Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. We behold the rising sun, the earth awakes, your hope has come. We look to you, we long for you, oh Lord. Oh, Lord, how majestic is your name in all the earth. Oh, Lord,
Good morning. Good morning, kids. Good morning, adults. Good morning, folks watching us online today. It is so good to be with you today. Some of us are more excited and exuberant to be here than others, but regardless, even if I'm not shouting like that from the front, it is really good to be with you today. My name is Jeremy. I am the pastor here of the Grove, Cottage Grove, and we are a brand new church that exists to grow goodness. And so we hope that whether you're in the front row or you are sitting back and kind of taking it all in, or you're watching us online, or you're interacting with us sometime during the week out in the community, that somehow we are nurturing healing, wholeness, and beauty in your life.
Well, welcome if you're new here, or I know I've seen some familiar faces today. We do have a handout in the middle. There is a hello and welcome. You can fill it out if you're new here today, or if you need any type of information on our kids program, any type of adult programs that we have. And then also in the front page, there's also information on giving. There's a couple ways to give. You can give in person. You can also give online and Venmo.
And if you fill out the insert, or if you have giving, where like you have something physical today, there are 2 baskets at the back of the worship center. You can drop either of those things in as you are on your way out this morning. Also on the worship handout, I'll direct you to the back side. The back side has our 3 things to know. These are like the 3 most important things that we really want folks to be keying in on for this month. So the first thing is our Lent series, which we're calling Polarized. Lent, if you are not familiar with that word or that terminology or that season, is the season leading up to Easter. It is the time of preparation and getting us ready for Easter, and that season kicks off on Ash Wednesday. I don't know how, but Ash Wednesday is already this Wednesday. So to kick off that season, often there are Ash Wednesday services. You might see people walking around with ash on their heads. The Grove is hosting an Ash Wednesday service on Wednesday, again, this coming Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. at our Woodbury location, so not here, at our Woodbury location, but Katie and Jacob are going to be leading music there. I've been saying that. That is correct, right? Okay, just I probably should have confirmed before now, but 6:30 this Wednesday, if that is of interest to you in kicking off this season of preparation for Easter. Wednesday, 6:30 p.m., Katie and Jacob will be leading music at our Woodbury location. There's going to be lots of other things going on with Lent in this time leading up to Easter, including this series called Polarized, what drives us apart and what can bring us together. If you're interested in more information about that, you can go to that link, scan that QR code, or just, it'll give you all the information about the series and the season leading up to Easter. The second thing is get involved. Getting involved, finding a place where you can fit and flourish using your gifts and passions within the church is a great way not only to invest in the life of the church, but also to get to know people. And so if you are not yet involved, but you're interested in getting involved, if you consider the Grove to be your church home, we'd love to find a place for you to get connected where you can use those gifts and talents. You can either go to that QR code and look at all of the different options that we have out there for lots of different teams, lots of different engagement opportunities, lots of different time commitments, or you can fill out the hello and welcome insert here and put volunteer opportunities, and we will follow up with you and discuss lots of different options in regards to getting involved. The last thing is baptism. Baptism is one of the sacraments of the church. Again, if you're not familiar with that term, a sacrament is an outward sign of an inward grace. One of the sacraments of the church is communion. Another one is baptism. So baptism is a sign of something that God is doing in your life. And baptism in the United Methodist Church, of which the Grove is a part, is for anybody. So it is for newborns all the way up to grown adults who are, for the first time, saying, you know what, I think that I am serious about this whole following Jesus thing, and I want to make this public outward expression of the inward grace at work in my life. If you are interested in baptism, or you're interested in learning more about baptism, you're not sure about it, but you'd like to know a little bit more, You can go to that link again, you can scan that QR code, or you can fill out the insert, and again, on the back side, there is a box that you can check to get more information about baptism.
Well, here at the Grove, we love kids. As you can tell, we have a whole front row of kids up here. We do have little coloring pages in the back of the pews along with color crayons. We will also dismiss the kids shortly for the Grove Kids. And then we do have a nursery as well that goes from 6 weeks to 3 years old. If you are new here and if you want to just fill out, there's a little card in the back of the pews to fill out. And if there's something, you're needed for something, that we can shoot you a text or come and get you in regards to your child.
Connection point.
All right, so for Connection Point, the question is, what is your favorite item you've bought this year? All right, so feel free to stand up and ask your neighbors, what is your favorite item that you've bought this year?
All right, y'all can find your way back. come on back. All right, I'm cutting you all off. Save it for afterwards. This is usually not a problem at church. Usually people are like, hi. Okay, now nobody talk to me. I love that we have this culture of getting to know each other before, after, during worship. Like, what would this even be if we weren't connecting with each other? I love that we are a thriving, functioning church. So thank you for those of you who are less likely to talk to strange people you don't know. Thank you for being brave enough to engage in conversation and meet some new folks. We love it. All right, it is time for our kids to head out to Grove Kids. If you would like your children to go out there for their time, they'll rejoin us at the end of worship, but they'll leave now and we will sing them out with a song. Jesus loves the little children, all the children of the world. Every color, shape, and type, they are precious in His sight. Jesus loves the little children of the world. I love that peaceful moment that comes after. We love having our kids, and we love the peace and quiet. Well, I don't know what you all came here with today that is kind of sitting on your heart or your mind, whether it's just some, normal anxieties or nervousness about what's coming up this week for you, or whether there's a much deeper, more lingering sense of fear or anxiety or whatever about the future. But I want to offer a message of comfort and hope for that today. And I'm drawing from scripture for this. In what we call our Old Testament, there's this book of Jeremiah. Jeremiah is a prophet. And Jeremiah is bringing a word of God to a people who are in exile, people who have been taken out of their home country, people who've lost everything. And God has a word of comfort for them. According to Jeremiah, God is asking them to, in the midst of their exile, not try to escape that, but instead stay there, work toward the future, building something new, growing something good where they are. Which was probably a hard message to hear when you're in a place where you've lost everything. But yet God comes with a message of hope. And then we hear, maybe you know these familiar words from Jeremiah 29:11. For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord. Plans to prosper you and not to harm you. Plans to give you hope and a future. Even in the midst of anxiety, even in the midst of suffering, even in the midst of hope for our future, even though this message was written for a specific people at a specific time and place, I think we can draw from this timeless truth that God is still hopeful that we can build something good even in the midst of all of that. And to not necessarily run away from the hard stuff, but to find the good and grow the good in that. So I hope that message of hope and comfort sits on your heart today as we sing a couple songs, one old and one new. You can, if you like, or if you're comfortable, you can rise and sing with us, or if you just need to sit and rest and sing with us, that's fine too. Great is thy faithfulness, O God, Creator. There is no shadow of turning with thee. they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness. Great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see. All I have needed, thy hand hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. You are the God of the wrong made right. You are the darkness turned to light. You are the God of the kingdom come, but the kingdom reigns with boundless love. When all comes crashing down around us, we know you'll rebuild. When all seems lost and courage faded, make us steadfast still. You are the God of the war-turned peace. You take our grief and give us dancing, dancing. You are the God of the cold, dark night, holding us till all is bright, bright. When all comes crashing down around us, we know you'll rebuild. When all seems lost and courage faded, make us steadfast still. Hope will come again. Enemy turn friend. Bury guns where gardens grow. Rebuilding comes so slow, but hope will come again. Enemy turn friend. We'll bury guns where gardens grow. Rebuilding comes so slow, but we know you are the beginning and the end. You'll bring healing back around again, around again. You are fear turned fortitude, and life and death, we cling to you. And great is thy faithfulness. God, with all of this heaviness that we hold within us. May we bring it to you, and you can help lighten our load. You can help us envision a future where we might not see one, and help us grow something good there. It's by your grace we pray. Amen. Speaking of goodness and beautiful things, as a part of our Beautiful Mess series, we have had the pleasure to hear so many people in our congregation come up here and tell us parts of their stories, specifically in relation to their faith and all the beauty and all the mess that comes with that. Today's our last day for this, sadly. We'll have to find another series to do something like this soon, because it's always so meaningful when we get to hear from each other and not just listen to me and Jeremy talk all the time.
It's true.
So today, our last person to share is Zach Felstad. So Zach, we welcome you up here. And thank you in advance for trusting us with your story.
So, thanks.
Welcome, Zach.
Hey, thanks.
Good to see you.
Good to see everybody here.
Yeah. Okay, I was going to call this out later, but I am just loving the 3 rows of gap.
I noticed that too.
It's like a buffer zone.
You guys aren't much different than high schoolers, really. Every classroom that I go by, it's literally the first 3 or 4
Yeah.
rows. And
You know what? I'm
high
going to take it
schoolers.
as a message of you all really like each other, and the first person sat down in the back, and you're just clustered together because you want to be near each other instead of away from us. All right, well, with that out of the way, super excited that we get to hear your story today. So again, we've got these 3 questions, and it's like 3 different acts. There's a past, there's a nearer to present, and then there's like a present and looking forward type of question and act. And we'll try to stick to the questions and see where we go. But the first one is about past. So the first question is about your spiritual/religious history. What was your upbringing like? Where did you find yourself? How were you raised spiritually, religiously, all that?
I grew up very, upper middle class, white privileged, out in Delano, Minnesota. Authoritative parents, got grounded for nearly everything, which was great. We grew up in the youth group. My parents were youth leaders from as far back as I can remember. Even before we were born, my parents were youth leaders. So we grew up in the youth group, and everything, our whole lives revolved around that. And so even like before I was of age to be in the youth group, I was still a part of the youth group. So, and then going up into high school, my whole friend group was all about youth group. All about youth group. Was on the leadership team for youth group, and our whole goal at that time. I grew up evangelical free, and so the whole goal of our whole ministry was to get as many people to come as possible, right? And so, in high school, our whole mentality as a part of the leadership team was to get as many kids to come to youth group as possible, and it worked. We did it. Like, we got the whole popular class in high school to come to our youth group, and we felt so much power in that. And it wasn't, I look back on my time in high school and I cringe every time I think about it, because I cringe because of the reason why we were there, or that we felt we were there, or what we were doing. We got this huge crew of like all the big, influential kids to come to our youth group, and it started to turn into like a power stroke in each and every one of us. So we started doing a lot of charismatic, we turned that into, rather than celebrating and trying to reach out to kids who were not connected in the high school, we started to become very exclusive as a group, and we started to become very charismatic, like laying on hands, even when we're singing like and shouting and raising our hands and doing all this stuff at every event. Like, even if we were singing like Jesus Loves Me, This I Know, we were like, yeah, like going crazy. And we'd go to these events, like conferences with other youth groups, and people would be looking like, what is happening? Why? So, and we felt like, we were one with the Spirit, and maybe we were, but I don't know if we were. I feel like it was more like, we we were just super powerful as teenagers. Like we had this like influence over the school. And then we graduated and it all left. And for me, I was such a follower of that group. I was influential in the group, but I was mostly a follower. And I realized after we graduated, my faith, my quote unquote faith, was with all those kids. So we all went off to college. And for me, I didn't have any friends that I stayed with. I went to the University of Minnesota for my first 2 years, and that's when Jesus left, or whatever faith I thought I had left, and depression took over. Depression and anxiety. And so my entire life outside of high school has been an up and down motion of, transitioning between mania and depression based on what I feel, reaching out for anything I could find that I could connect to. That's where, sport, like when I got into college, rugby came into play. I was a really big rugby player throughout college. And along with rugby comes all the other stuff that I was like, oh yeah, this is it now. Partying, all that stuff. And my faith was completely just an outfit that I wore in front of my family or in front of my friends when we came home from college. It was nothing more than that. It was empty, completely empty. And Heather, my wife, Heather, she's been kind of a part of this journey as well. And I was graduating from college, I was completely empty. Wanted nothing to do with anything church, and I escaped. I went to New Zealand to live for 6 months. Again, I feel like this is not traumatic. This is an upper middle class white kid, having questions about life. And again, I look back and I was like, God, this is so cringy. When you think about the problems that I deal with versus the problems that so many other people out there deal with. And I was just empty. So after I came back from New Zealand, I jumped into teaching. My aunt told me, hey, you'd make a good special ed teacher. So jumped into it and started working with kids in downtown St. Paul. And I worked at this little school called Jennings Community Learning Center, which is right off of Highway 280 and University Avenue. And our population at the time was 75% homeless. We had about 90 kids attending that school. I thought every day, my whole lexicon for how I look at life, when you start working with transient youth, kids who are coming from those situations, your whole lookout on life just gets completely flipped, the way I look at spirituality, the way I was raised, going back to when I was raised, we were raised on a healthy diet of heaven and hell, right, of end times and all that stuff. So you can't have empathy towards this specific group of kids or any kids that you meet and still hold on to that belief of heaven and hell, as it were, or as it is. And so my whole belief system for Christianity was just even more wiped away working with these kids, because how could God, if God could allow someone like me to live this life, why does he not have the power to allow those kids to live a life like that? It doesn't make any sense to me. Never made any sense. And I continue to struggle with that this day. I don't know if I don't know if I believe in heaven or hell. I don't hold that belief anymore. I don't want to believe it. I choose not to believe it. So when Heather and I first got married, we were seeking different churches. We went to one church up in Hudson, and it was like, wow, we found this great group of people to be around, and all of a sudden that church got shut down. So we were left. And then we joined another church in St. Paul, 7th Street, or what was it called? Is it Awaken or whatever? No. Yeah. Awaken, yeah. And then we ended up moving, so we left that church and then went to Prescott. We joined Torrent in Prescott, and that's kind of how we found this place, is through people from there. And that church got shut down. And when that church shut down, I felt zero remorse whatsoever. Just kind of that complete empty feeling, because what was it other than just another suit that I wore on Sunday? Another suit that I wore to impress people. And so I'm tired of faking it. I'm tired of faking it Christianity-wise. We, earlier on in our relationship, my and Heather's relationship, we really started reading things by Rob Bell, right? And I hate, it makes me cringe to think that I got into that whole, I really grew critical of the whole Christian movement about, like, we're starting to worship leaders like Mark Driscoll and all these other people, Rob Bell. But for some reason, when he came out with his book, Love Wins, it spoke to me about the fact that, God doesn't fail. If God is who he says he is, if God is what the Bible says he is, then why would God fail? So that takes out the whole idea of, like, in my mind, the existence or the basis for Christianity on a heaven and hell. And so I've really separated myself from that. I've separated myself from a God who looks down on people for the choices they make. I've separated myself from a God who blesses people for being ultra fervent with him. And right now, in the past few years, I've come to believe in community. I've come to believe in servitude and just helping others. Not in Jesus' name, but because I feel like that's just our sole, purpose as human beings. Whatever experiment this is, our world is, whether it's God as in who he says his name is in the Bible, or whether it's some guy up in a higher dimension just playing some grandiose experiment, then why not make it successful? Why take from me? Why not make it a successful experiment? So my belief is I believe in community. I believe in helping.
Growing goodness?
Growing goodness.
Yeah?
Absolutely. So, yeah, I appreciate how we've been looking at the Bible. My major in college was history. I studied a lot of history. I read the Iliad and Odyssey and realized that those are poetically written and written about the same time that some of the Bible stories were written. And why can we not look at the Bible in that same way, very poetically, very imagery-like? There's so many beautiful stories in the Bible, and you think about the people that have gone through trials and tribulations and what they've come out with. It's the community that's always been there. It's always been the people who have been serving, and that's what truly makes a difference in my mind. So that's where I stand. I know it's convoluted and crazy, but I honestly question every day, even up till last night when I was, getting my full 40 minutes of anxiety last night. It was, what do I believe? I don't even know, We grew up giving testimonies, so that, we can get baptized. It's like, I don't know what I could give you as my testimony other than the fact that my life revolves around my family through the kids that I work with on a daily basis at school. I'm a high school EBD teacher, so my life is fully enveloped in that and going down the bad trails with kids and making sure that I'm able to be with them to pull them back up again. But I don't even know what I believe anymore. So
Join the club. I don't know why you needed me to interview you, because I asked you one question and then you took it from there. Anything else you'd like to say? Because you answered all the questions. Anything else you'd like to say?
I don't know. It's no, really. I don't have anything else to say.
One of the four things. So like we've got the four icons out here that kind of represent the four values that align with what we mean when we say grow goodness. And one of them is about, I'm forgetting the words now. nurturing, healing, wholeness, and beauty. Deepening, thank you, Katie from the back. Deepening our curiosity and sense of awe. And that means like there's no arrival and there's constant questioning and constantly striving for a better understanding of ourselves and God and the world. And yet we never like arrive. And that is an expectation that we will never arrive and be like set in our beliefs. So the fact that you continue to question everything, I like it. Truly, join the club.
So,
All right.
I appreciate this place because of the opportunities it provides people to get involved. It provides just a comfortable community of people who are just welcoming, and we're here, and yeah.
Well, we're glad you're here. Let's give Zach a hand. All right. Thanks, bud. All right. Well, this is the final week of this Beautiful Mess series. And throughout this series, we have been doing things just like that. We've been having people from our community sharing their own messy stories of faith. Because we believe truly, one thing that we do believe, that we know we believe, is that it is in that messiness that there's beauty, right? Throughout this series, as we've heard these stories from people from our congregation, and we've looked at these stories in the Bible, we've said, what if like the Japanese art of kintsugi, like this hand up here, what if rather than trying to polish over all of the imperfections in order to make it look crisp and clean, we instead like drew out those imperfections, focused on the cracks, and said maybe those cracks can instead become highlights. So we've had stories from people like Zach, and then we've also been looking to stories from the Bible, and specifically looking at this chapter in the book of Hebrews, chapter 11, that talks about these different stories and these different heroes. And yet, one of the things that I've really became convinced as I was reading this past week is not so much that this series has been about heroes, but it's more been about the importance of stories and like the way that we understand and we craft our stories. Zach talked a bit about like approaching the Bible like other stories of the Bible, like we do other stories. Stories, whether they are TV shows that we watch or movies that we go to see or books that we read, even if they are historical books that we read, even the stories that we tell about ourselves. These are not like complete history. They are not complete things like fact-finding. We've got someone who's sitting there with us writing down every single fact about what is happening in the room. This is not how we tell stories, any of our stories. We craft them in a certain way because we have an understanding of what happened, that we want to communicate and better understand how we arrived, where we are now, and who we are now, so that we can then better understand where on earth are we going from here. It is about past, it is about present in order to know where we are going in the future. So we have this book of Hebrews that was written to these people who were followers of Jesus, but trying to think through, does this really fit anymore? This is getting hard, this is getting messy. Maybe we need to go back to our own way of living. And the writer of Hebrews is saying to them, no, even and especially in the mess, this is the time to lean in to your stories and our historical stories. In fact, all of these stories from our past, all of these heroes from our past, their lives were messy. Their faith was messy. And if we are okay with that mess, we are going to be better for it, and things are going to be even more beautiful for it. Remember these heroes from the past. Remember Abraham and Isaac and Jacob and Hagar. Remember Moses. All of these great heroes, their stories were messy, and yours can be messy too, and we're all going to be better for it. So finally today, as we enter our last day, our last week of this series, we turn to one last hero and one last story, which is in Hebrews 11:30 through 31. By faith, the walls of Jericho fell after the people marched around them for 7 days. By faith, Rahab, the prostitute, escaped the destruction of the disobedient because she welcomed the spies in peace. You may or may not be familiar with the story of Jericho and of Rahab. This is a story that happens in the Old Testament book of Joshua. So Joshua, as a whole, is this book that is a book of transition. It is itself a book of transition in the Bible. There's the first 5 books of the Bible, which are all about the history of Israel, like setting the foundations for the people of Israel. The book of Joshua is this transition into a new generation of people who are leading the people of Israel. It is a transition from, hey, we were in slavery in Egypt, now we are finally moving into this new land. It is a whole new generation of people who did not grow up in slavery in Egypt and now are having to understand their new identities as they find themselves in this new land. And it's also a transition from this generational leader in Moses who led them out of slavery in Egypt to his follower, his second in command, named Joshua, after whom this book is written. There's all of this transition happening as we turn to the book of Joshua. And that transition brings all sorts of anxiety, including for Joshua himself. So the book begins with a pep talk. And it's a pep talk between God and Joshua, because apparently he needs a pep talk as he's about to take the reins of this thing. And so this is where you might be familiar with this line. It's on like all sorts of coffee mugs and wall art. And be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be concerned, for God will be with you wherever you are. This is God talking to Joshua. Be strong, be courageous, go get him, Tiger. So like the coach who's giving that pep talk to the quarterback in his office, Joshua then is all psyched up. He goes out and he delivers this message to the people of Israel. Be strong, be courageous. We are about to move into this new land that has been promised to us. Let's go. The whole team is like, let's go. And they go to move into the land, and 2 big problems hit them. The first is a river, which is at flood stage. That's number 1. And number 2 is this big city with a huge wall around it. So as they're all ready to go, as they're about to move into this land, they got this pep talk, they're all about it, they hit these 2 big problems. And this is where we get these 2 unexpected but heroic actions. So the first one comes in the form of a woman named Rahab, kind of by accident. Joshua, he gets settled a little bit. He's like, all right, well, this is not ideal, but maybe we can figure this out. Maybe we can figure out how to get into this city. I'm going to send some spies in to kind of get a lay of the land, and they're going to report back to us how to best take over this city. So he sends 2 men to be spies, and they're like under the guise of being businessmen traveling into town. And unfortunately, when they first arrive in town, they act like some businessmen who are just traveling into town might, and the first place they hit up is the brothel. And they just happen on that first night to have a sleepover at the brothel. Not great, right? Well, the leader of this brothel is Rahab. Rahab in the text is described as a prostitute. We might call her a sex worker. And she jumps into action here. And not in the ways that we might expect a sex worker to jump into action. She instead looks at the situation and goes to the spies and says, listen, I understand what's going on here. I have heard about your God and what your God has allowed you to do. And I know that you're in trouble and you're not supposed to be here. So we're going to make a deal. I'm going to let you go free and report back to your people about how to best conquer our city. And when you come back, you are going to leave me and my family alone. Okay? That's our deal. You good on that deal? last summer, we did a series called Campfire Stories, and I did a whole sermon just on Rahab and how Rahab has been misunderstood and mischaracterized and shamed throughout the years. I would highly encourage you, if you haven't heard that, to go back and listen to it on our podcast feed. But here's what you need to know. Rahab was not this prostitute who was making all these decisions for herself. Rahab was a woman in a very patriarchal society who was doing the best she could with what she had and what power she had. And now she finds herself given very little autonomy, making the best of what she has. She figures out she's got this experience. She has this lived experience. She has these calluses that have been built up on her hands. And she says, how can I, given where I have been, given what has happened to me, make the best of my current situation and go forward for myself and my family and even these spies in a much better situation? All right, so the spies, they like that deal. They go off, they go back to the people of Israel, they report back to Joshua, and they start making a plan for going to Jericho. They've got this river in front of them, though, right? So they go up to the river. The whole people of Israel go up to the river, and they do what? They stop. They themselves, they are a new generation of people. Most of them did not come out of Egypt as they were slaves. There was this story of coming out of Egypt and God miraculously splitting the Red Sea so that they could cross. Most of them were a new generation that if they had the experience of doing that, they had no memory. They were too young to know that. But they had the stories that their parents and their grandparents told them about how God had done this crazy thing. So reflecting on that story, they walk up to that water and they do nothing. And what happens? The water stops. Just like the old story. Just like that story that their parents and grandparents had handed down to them. And then they walk across on dry land. Then on the other side, they do something weird. They take out their knives and swords. And we're all expecting what? They're going to attack the city. They start sharpening their knives and swords. They do not immediately attack the city. You know what they do with those knives and swords? They start circumcising each other. So again, these are people that did not live in Egypt. They have been out in the wilderness for 40 years. They were born in that setting. The active circumcision, I'm not going to go into the details about it. If you need to know what that is, probably don't Google it. Ask a trusted person that you know to tell you what circumcision is. The purpose of circumcision was like to set apart the people of Israel. It was an action for them to take of their trust in God. So as they are about to move into this new land, they themselves, the men, have not done this before. Before they go in and do this thing, they're going to take the time to do this thing that their ancestors did as a sign that they were making a commitment to God. They take out their knives, they sharpen them, and they have a mass circumcision event. What on earth is going on? Finally, once the blood stops flowing, probably, they go to the walls and they do not attack. They walk around the city, silent. They go one time around, they stop, and they go back to their camp. The next day, they do the exact same thing. Day after day, for 6 days, they do nothing other than walking around in one circle silently. And then on the seventh day, this happens. On the seventh day, they were up at the crack of dawn and marched around the city as before. Only this time they marched around it 7 times. The 7th time around, the priests blew the ram's horns, and Joshua told the army, "Give the battle cry, for the Lord is handing the city over to you. The city and all that is in it must be set apart for the Lord, except for Rahab, the prostitute, and all who are with her in her house, because she hid the spies we sent." The ram's horn sounded, and when the army heard the signal, they gave a loud battle cry. The wall collapsed, and the warriors charged straight ahead into the city and captured it. This story is bonkers. It is bonkers to think that they walked up to this water and suddenly it just stopped and they were able to walk over. It's bonkers that they would take the time to take out their swords and their knives and sharpen them and then do a mass circumcision event. It is bonkers to think that rather than attacking the city, they just march around it for 7 days and then they let out a ram's horn and the whole thing collapses so that they can go in without having to deal with the wall at all. It's bonkers. Like, let's just acknowledge that. It doesn't make sense. So what on earth is going on here? Well, I am convinced that when it comes to both Rahab and to the city of Jericho, when the people of Israel come in, these are unexpected and heroic acts of people who are reflecting on their stories about what has happened before, who they are now, and where they can go from here. They're leaning into their stories of what has happened in the past so that they can have the courage, the gumption, the belief that they can do what they need to do now in order to go forward. Rahab, I'm convinced, is able to do what she is able to do, not in spite of her profession and her experience, but because of it. Because she had to learn how to make the best of a bad situation, she had the ability to face down these spies, to face down this army, to face down this God and say, here's what's going to happen. When she had no business being able to do that. In the same way, these people of Israel who had no real experience with God like their ancestors had, no experience of being able to cross over on dry land, no experience of God doing these crazy things, is able to lean into their story and say, I can trust that that was true then, and it's going to impact me now to be able to step in, to be able to have the confidence that I can do this hard and even crazy thing. Again, they knew what had happened, who they were then, and what they needed to do going forward. This is a phenomenon that's known as priming. Okay? Are you familiar with priming or like the act of priming? Maybe like when you started a gas lawnmower, you have to prime it first in order for it to start up really quickly. So priming is this phenomenon that allows us to do a hard thing because we're familiar with that hard thing before we do it. Sometimes it's because we've already been through that hard thing, or because we're so aware of the hard thing that's coming that we're ready and we're prepared to do that hard thing now and going forward. So there's like this psychological aspect to it. We know it because we've been through it, or we know enough about it that we can convince ourselves that we can do it. But there's actually a physiological thing to priming as well. Our brains work in such a way that if we have a past experience of doing a hard thing, when we confront that hard thing again, our brain knows this is familiar, and it releases the chemicals that allow us to do that hard thing, have that confidence, actually have the physiological capability of doing that hard thing. You don't actually have to have had that experience, though. You can know enough about what the experience is that is coming and have the exact same physiological reaction. You can know that something hard is coming, study up on it, and when that hard thing happens, your brain does the exact same thing, sending out those chemicals that allow you to do that hard thing. The opposite of that is true, though, too. If you convince yourself that you can't do it, if you tell a story about yourself that you cannot do that hard thing, your brain also sends out different chemicals that prevents you from doing it. So what on earth does that mean? Well, like in athletics, this is why we train. This is why we train, so that when in a race or in a game, when we're faced with a hard thing that has to be done, we're ready for it. Because we've done that training, we've faced it in practice, we know that that hill is coming because we know the course, and when that hill comes, we're not going to hit a wall because we're ready to go, and our brain says, let's do this. This is also true in life, though, too, folks. We have these stories that we tell about ourselves, negative or positive, and as we approach these hard things, we can either say, I am not good enough, I cannot possibly do this, or we can say, I have this past, and my goodness is it messy, but it has prepared me and created me to be the person that I am now. It has given me the ability to do hard things now, and I'm going to do this hard thing now and in the future. Pumping that brain prime, giving us what we need to get through the difficult things and to do so together. This is in athletics. This is in life. This is why we know and we tell our stories. So as we wrap up this series today, I want to provide a little bit of a gift. And I think that it is a gift not just for you as individuals, but it will be a gift for us as a community. Because every single week we've been sharing these stories from the Bible. We've been having people from our community share these stories. And every single week I've tried to reiterate, I want you to think through your own story too. Start crafting your own understanding of where you've been, who you are now, and where you can go from here. Because it's good for you and it's good for other people to hear that story too. And so what the gift is we actually have now at the back of the worship center, there's these pieces of paper, and on this web page, we've got a script for you to be able to follow to start crafting your own story. It starts with a paragraph about we all have messy stories, how important this exercise can be. Our stories are often messy and incomplete, but they can become highlights, and then it walks through these 5 different movements, kind of like the movements that I was trying to get Zach to walk through. The oops, where you're upsetting the equilibrium. The ugh, where you're analyzing the discrepancy. You're looking backwards at this messiness. The aha, there's this transition, this shift, disclosing the clue to resolution. The we, experiencing the gospel, experiencing this transformation in yourself or in your understanding of yourself and God and the world. And then the yay, the anticipating the consequences, where then we go from here. Again, I hope that this is a helpful tool, not only for yourself, but for other people too. And I hope that you truly believe as we end out this series, as we end today, that, yeah, your story is messy. My story is messy. Our stories are messy. They're full of cracks. They're full of imperfections. But they're also beautiful. They're worthy of highlights. And so may we see our stories in that way. May we see them as gifts as they are, and may we share them with others as gifts as well. May that be so.
We all rise and sing with us one more time today. In the middle of the night, when worry finds me, in the middle of a fight, when strength is gone, in the middle of a fire, when fear is closing in, you are my song. You're my hope when hope is gone. So I will cast my cares on you, the Almighty, and I will cast my cares on you, 'cause you're good. And I will cast my cares on you, 'cause you love me. You is gone. In the middle of a fire, when fear is closing in, you are my song. And you're my hope when hope is gone. So I will cast my cares on you, the Almighty. And I will cast my cares on you, 'cause you're good. And I will cast my cares on you, 'cause you love me. You love me. Oh, oh, because you love me. Oh, oh, because you love me. And God of glory, you are able through your power to be faithful. God of mercy, every moment you are near to me. God of glory, God of glory, you are able through your power to be faithful. God of mercy, every moment you are near to me. Oh, and I will cast my cares on you, the Almighty. And I will cast my cares on you, 'cause you're good. I will cast my cares on you, 'cause you love me. You love me. Oh, oh, because you love me. Oh, oh, because you love me. In the middle of the night, I'll pray with confidence. In the middle of a fight, you're greater still. In the middle of a fire, your love is holding me. You are my song. And you're my hope when hope is gone.
One thing before we head out today. Again, this Wednesday is Ash Wednesday, the beginning of Lent. If you're interested in participating in the Ash Wednesday service that the Grove is offering, it is going to be at our Woodbury location. Again, this Wednesday at 6:30. I need to reiterate p.m. I don't know if I said that before. Sometimes Ash Wednesday services happen at the crack of dawn. This is p.m. Woodbury location, 6:30, and Jacob and Katie will be leading that. As always, it's so good to be with you. So good to be wrapping up this season and looking forward to this next season. I want to give thanks again to Zach for sharing today and all of you who have shared over the course of this series. We're going to find more ways to tell more of these stories. Why? Because your stories are important, and because your stories are messy, and your stories are beautiful, and they belong here. Are they messy? Join the club. Truly. It is absolutely true. So, with that in mind, I'll have you extend your hands to receive the blessing. In our messiness, may we know that we are valued, we are loved, we are beautiful just as we are. May we better understand where we've been, who we are, and where we can go from here with God at work in and through our lives. May that be so.